I never thought helping someone move would change my life, but that's exactly what happened the day my ex's little brother showed up at my door. It had been almost 2 years since Dylan and I broke up. We didn't end things dramatically, just drifted apart the way people do when they're young and dumb and think timing is the only thing that matters. I hadn't spoken to him since. Not because we hated each other, but because it was easier to pretend we never really tried. So when I opened the door that Saturday morning and saw Leo standing there with a box of vinyl records and that same crooked smile I remembered from high school, I froze. "Hey," he said. Like it hadn't been years. Like I hadn't once pictured him as just the annoying younger brother tagging along when Dylan and I were still a thing. "You said you had space in your storage, right?" He looked different now. Taller, broader, still had that chaotic mop of curls, but less baby-faced than I remembered. His voice was deeper too, and his eyes didn't dart around the room like they used to. I blinked. Yeah, I do. Come in." He stepped inside like he belonged there, like this wasn't the weirdest reunion possible. I watched him set the box down carefully by the couch before standing up and dusting off his hands. "You look good," he said. "Thanks. You look different." "Puberty hit me like a freight train," he said with a smirk, and I laughed before I could stop myself. It was supposed to be a quick favor. He was moving into a smaller place and needed somewhere to stash his stuff temporarily. I was just the guy with extra storage in the basement and maybe a bit of guilt for how I disappeared after breaking up with his brother. I owed him that much. But then one box turned into 4. And 4 boxes turned into a weekend of helping him rearrange furniture in his new apartment. He made me coffee in the mornings, cracked jokes the whole time, and somewhere between building a bookshelf and ordering greasy burgers on the floor at midnight, I realized something had shifted. Leo wasn't just Dylan's kid brother anymore, and the way he looked at me sometimes, like he saw something he'd been waiting years to find, scared the hell out of me. I told myself it was just nostalgia, familiarity, leftover feelings from a time when everything felt simpler. But when he leaned against the kitchen counter on Sunday night, wiping his hands on a dish towel and watching me like I was more interesting than anything on TV, I felt my stomach twist. "You don't have to disappear again, you know," he said softly. My throat went dry. "What?" he shrugged. "After you and Dylan broke up, you kind of vanished." I always wondered if it was just about him, or if it was something else. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was, I'd avoided him back then not because of Dylan, but because of a moment I'd never told anyone about. A stupid, fleeting second during a movie night when Dylan had left the room, and Leo had laughed at something I said, and I'd looked at him and thought, God help me. What if? I buried that thought so deep I forgot it existed. Until now. I wish I could say I responded with something clever, something that would have explained everything without making it more complicated. But all I could do was stand there, gripping the edge of the counter like it might anchor me to the moment. Leo tilted his head, waiting. His face didn't change much, but there was something in his eyes. Quiet, steady, like he already knew the answer and was giving me space to catch up. "You were Dylan's little brother," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it was right to keep hanging around." He nodded slowly. "But you didn't just leave Dylan, you left me too." That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, looking down at the worn tile floor of his new kitchen. It was uneven in places, the kind of thing that would have driven me nuts if I weren't so distracted by everything else. "I didn't mean to," I said. Leo stepped forward, close enough that I could smell the hint of soap on his skin. Something clean and simple. Not cologne, not a statement. Just him. "Maybe not," he said. "But you did." For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence felt thick, like the air right before a summer thunderstorm. He reached past me, brushing my arm slightly as he set the dish towel on the counter. The touch was light, barely there, but it jolted through me like a live wire. I caught his gaze and held it, something I hadn't been able to do since he walked through my door. There was no mistaking it now. He wasn't playing. He wasn't confused. And this wasn't just some unresolved teenage crush. "You've changed," I said, immediately hating how obvious it sounded. "So have you," he replied, a half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But not enough to fool me." "Fool you?" "I saw the way you looked at me," he said. "You think I didn't notice? You've been nervous all weekend." He was right. Every time I caught myself staring too long, I'd pretend I was distracted by a piece of furniture or some imaginary noise. But it hadn't worked. Not on him. I stepped back slightly, more out of instinct than anything else. "This is complicated." Leo's expression didn't change. "It doesn't have to be. You're Dylan's brother. And you're not with Dylan anymore," he said simply. "You haven't been for a long time." It was such a rational answer, so clean and logical, and yet everything in me still screamed for caution. I had spent years building emotional walls, not just to protect myself, but to make sure I never got too close to anyone who might shatter the image I had of what was safe. Leo wasn't safe. He was real. He was standing in front of me, looking at me not like someone chasing a fantasy, but like someone who had already made peace with what he wanted. And suddenly, I didn't know if I was strong enough to walk away from that. I didn't say anything. Not right away. Just stood there like an idiot while Leo slowly closed the distance between us again. "I'm not trying to mess things up for you," he said quietly, his voice a little softer now. I wanted to see if I was imagining things. That's all." "You weren't," I said before I could stop myself. It slipped out, barely louder than a breath, but I knew he heard it. The moment hung there, stretched and taut, like it might snap under its own weight. Leo nodded slowly, and something in his shoulders seemed to relax. He looked almost relieved. "Okay," he said, "just that." Like it answered everything. I half expected him to make a move, to reach out or lean in, but he didn't. He just stood there with that same calm, patient expression, like he was offering a choice, not pushing one. I'd been around enough guys to know the difference, so I stepped past him, brushing his arm more than I needed to, and picked up one of the takeout containers we hadn't touched. My hands were shaking a little, but I kept my voice even. "You want to eat something before this gets cold?" He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Yeah, sure." We sat at his tiny kitchen table, elbows bumping, and made small talk about nothing important. The food was bland, the conversation safer than it had been all weekend, but under the surface, everything buzzed. I caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, his eyes dragging over my jaw, my hands, the curve of my shoulders in the hoodie I had thrown on that morning. And I looked, too, at the lines of his throat when he tipped his head back to laugh, the way his forearms flexed when he opened a water bottle. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. I'd seen him before, sure, but not like this. Not like someone who was finally letting me see the real version of himself. The one that had been growing quietly all this time, just waiting for the right moment to step into the light. After dinner, we collapsed onto his couch, the TV playing some mindless reality show neither of us cared about. The silence between us felt easier now. We didn't have to fill it. We just let it sit, warm and close. Then his foot touched mine again. Not accidental this time. He didn't move it. Neither did I. I glanced over at him. He was staring at the screen, but I could see the edge of a smile playing at his lips, like he knew exactly what he was doing. "You're not as slick as you think," I murmured. He turned to me slowly, eyes lazy and soft. "Never said I was." I let my arm fall along the back of the couch, casual. At least, that's what I told myself. Leo leaned in a little. Not much, but enough to feel his shoulder brush mine. It would have been so easy to look away, to change the subject, but I didn't want to. "I meant what I said," I told him. "This is complicated." "I know," he replied, "but complicated doesn't mean wrong." There it was, that quiet confidence, that steady way he spoke when he was serious. It scared me how much I wanted to believe him, so I didn't say anything. I just stayed there, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him, heart beating way too fast for someone just sitting still. And when he finally looked at me again, really looked, I saw it. The same flicker of doubt, of hesitation, of hope that mirrored everything I was feeling. He didn't lean in. Neither did I. But everything between us had already started moving. The moment passed, but it left a mark. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop replaying it. The soft click of his front door shutting behind me. The faint warmth still lingering on my sleeve from where our arms had touched. The way he looked at me, not like someone who wanted a one-time thing, but like someone who was waiting for me to catch up. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind drifted back to him. His voice. His closeness. The quiet restraint we'd both clung to like a lifeline. It should have scared me more than it did. The next day, I told myself I'd give it space, let things settle. But by lunchtime, I found myself texting him about a box he'd accidentally left at my place. It was empty. I knew that. He probably did too. He responded with a thumbs up and a time. Around 5? At 5 on the dot, he showed up at my door. "Forgot my favorite box?" he said, grinning as he stepped inside. "Irreplaceable." I rolled my eyes but smiled, motioning him toward the kitchen where I'd set the empty box as an excuse to see him again. He didn't pick it up. Instead, he leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep much." His eyebrows lifted slightly, and he didn't press, just nodded like he understood. I poured us 2 coffees without asking if he wanted one. He took the mug with a quiet "thanks" and followed me to the living room. We didn't sit on opposite ends of the couch this time. He settled close, knee brushing mine, his body angled toward me, casual in a way that felt deliberate. "How's the new place?" I asked, desperate to ground us in something normal. "It's fine," he said. "Still feels a little empty." I nodded, sipping my coffee. He watched me for a second, then added, "Less empty now that I've got a reason to leave it." I froze. Not because I didn't understand what he meant, but because I did. And hearing him say it out loud made everything real, in a way I wasn't ready for. "You're not making this easy," I said, smiling, despite myself. Leo shrugged. "It's not supposed to be easy. You think I don't know what this looks like? You think I haven't thought about it?" I turned to face him. And I'm not afraid of complicated. I stared at him, trying to find a flaw in his logic, a reason to pull away. But there was none. Just the quiet intensity in his eyes, the warmth of his knee pressed against mine, and the sudden realization that the thing I'd been running from might actually be the thing I wanted most. I set my coffee down slowly, turning toward him. "So what now?" Leo leaned back slightly, his voice low and steady. "Now I wait until you're ready." That should have made me feel better, safer. But instead, it made my chest ache with something sharp and bright, because he meant it. He wasn't gonna push. He wasn't gonna demand anything. But the door was open, and all I had to do was step through it. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there next to him, coffee growing cold, silence thick with everything we weren't saying. Then, without thinking, I let my head rest against his shoulder. He didn't flinch, didn't say a word. He just stayed there, warm and steady, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment all along. We sat like that for a long time. No words, no sudden movements. Just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the soft weight of my head resting against him. Leo didn't shift. He didn't fidget or clear his throat. He just let me be there. And that, more than anything, was what cracked me open a little. Because I wasn't used to that. To someone waiting quietly. To someone being patient with my mess. Eventually, I sat up, and he let me go without a single word. Like it hadn't cost him anything to hold that space for me. But I knew it had. That kind of stillness takes effort. Discipline. I turned to him. When did you know? He didn't pretend not to understand. A while ago, he said. Probably before I should have. I looked down at my hands. And you just waited? Leo gave a small shrug. I figured you'd come around eventually. I smiled, soft and tired. Cocky. No, he said. Hopeful. I looked at him for a long time after that. Not speaking, just seeing him. Really seeing him. And not as Dylan's little brother, not as some impossible idea, but as the guy sitting on my couch who had shown up again and again without asking for anything in return. And suddenly it felt ridiculous that I'd wasted so much time pretending I didn't feel the same. I reached out without thinking, my fingers brushing his wrist. Tentative. He looked down at my hand, then back up at me. You sure? I don't know if I'll ever be sure, I admitted, but I want to stop pretending I don't feel this. He nodded once, then slowly turned his hand over so our palms met. That single gesture, the way our fingers slid together, the warmth of his skin against mine, felt more intimate than anything I'd done in a long time. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie moment. It was quiet, steady, terrifying. It was real. Later, when the sun dipped low and the city outside started to glow, we moved to the kitchen and made dinner together. Nothing fancy. Just pasta and a jar of sauce. But we moved around each other like we'd done it 1,000 times. Passing ingredients. Boiling water. Brushing shoulders. At one point, I looked over and caught him looking at me with this expression. Soft, full of something I didn't have words for yet. What? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing. Just, this feels good. Yeah, I said, barely above a whisper. It does. We ate on the couch, plates balanced on our knees, the TV murmuring in the background. Every so often our legs would touch, and neither of us would pull away. By the time he stood to leave, it was dark outside. He grabbed the empty box, the same one I'd used as an excuse, and paused by the door. I wasn't kidding, he said. If you need space, I'll give it to you, but I'm not going anywhere, just so you know. I nodded, throat tight. I know. Then he opened the door, hesitated, and turned back. If you change your mind, he said, about wanting me to stay longer next time, don't wait too long to tell me. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the apartment felt too quiet. I stood there for a moment, staring at the space he'd just been, the warmth of his presence still lingering like a ghost. The couch, the kitchen, the air, it all held echoes of him now. A hand on my wrist, a smile that asked for nothing. A voice that felt like home, even when everything else was confusing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what I wanted. I didn't text him that night. I didn't call. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every memory from the last few days, trying to figure out how something so quiet had gotten so loud inside me. By morning, I was already reaching for my phone. You free tonight? His reply came 2 minutes later. For you? Always. That night, I didn't pretend I had an excuse. I just let him in. He didn't bring a box this time. No pretense, no barrier. Just a small overnight bag, and that same calm confidence that made it easier to breathe around him. You want to talk about it? He asked, once we were settled in the living room again, both of us curled on opposite ends of the couch, our legs stretched out and tangled in the middle. Not yet, I said, but I don't want to avoid it either. Leo nodded. We've got time. That was the thing about him. He didn't fill the silence with pressure. He didn't rush. He just gave space to whatever needed room. We watched some movie neither of us cared about. Somewhere around the second act, his foot brushed mine again, and this time, I reached for his hand. He looked at me, not surprised, not smug, just present, and slid his fingers between mine without a word. Eventually, we moved to the bed, not in a rushed, desperate way. Just a quiet transition, the natural next step for two people who were tired of pretending to be something less than what they were becoming. He pulled off his hoodie, revealing a plain white t-shirt underneath. I slipped out of mine, self-conscious for a second, until he looked at me like I was exactly what he'd been hoping for. When we crawled into bed, there was no urgency, no fireworks, just the steady hum of two bodies finding comfort in closeness. His arm found its way around me, his breath soft against the back of my neck. "This okay?" he whispered. "Yeah," I breathed. "More than okay." And that's how I fell asleep, with his chest warm against my back, his hand resting gently over my heart, and this quiet sense of rightness blooming in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. I woke up before him. The morning light was soft, leaking through the blinds in faint streaks that landed across his bare arm. Leo was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way I rarely saw when he was awake. He always had this low-key energy to him, like he was waiting for the world to throw the next curveball. But now he just looked calm, peaceful. I lay there for a while, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, trying to wrap my head around how fast everything had changed, and how none of it felt rushed. It felt inevitable, like something we'd been moving toward for years without realizing it. Eventually he stirred, blinking against the light. He rolled onto his back and stretched, letting out a soft groan before turning to look at me with a lazy smile. "Morning, morning." There was a pause, but not an awkward one. More like neither of us wanted to break the spell of waking up like this, tangled in bed sheets and whatever the hell we were now. He reached out and ran his hand gently down my arm. "Still okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Better than okay." We stayed in bed longer than we should have, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation was light. Music, childhood stories, the worst teachers we'd ever had. But underneath it, something had shifted. He made coffee while I showered. I stood under the water, letting it hit the back of my neck, wondering how something so small, letting him stay the night, had changed everything. When I came out, he was standing in the kitchen, mug in hand, staring out the window like he belonged there, and maybe he did. He turned when he heard me, smiled softly. "You thinking this is still a one-night thing?" I shook my head. "I'm thinking this is something I don't want to screw up." Leo set the mug down and stepped toward me. "Then don't." It was so simple. So him. No big declarations, no promises we couldn't keep, just the space to be honest. I reached for his hand again. It felt easier this time, natural. "What happens when Dylan finds out?" I asked. Leo's jaw twitched slightly, but he didn't let go. "We deal with it, together." That word, together, hit harder than I expected. Because for the first time in a long time, I believed it. He stayed the rest of the day. We cooked together, played some old video games, and watched the sun set from the fire escape. And every now and then, he'd reach for me, my hand, my shoulder, a brush of his knee against mine. And I'd let him. I wanted him to. Later that night, before he left, he stood by the door, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "You want me to come back tomorrow?" he asked, voice casual, but there was something in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even hope. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I do." He grinned, kissed me on the cheek so gently I barely felt it, and walked out the door like he hadn't just turned my whole world inside out. I didn't expect him to come back the next day with groceries and a bottle of wine. But he did, like it was the most normal thing in the world, like we'd been doing this for years. He unpacked the bags while I hovered nearby, still not used to this version of us. "You cook," he said, tossing me a pack of pasta. "I'll open the wine." We slipped into a rhythm again, like we had that weekend with the boxes. Only this time, there was no pretending, no excuses, just us. He told me about a job interview he had coming up, and I told him about a freelance gig I was chasing. We didn't talk about the big stuff, the what are we, the labels, but somehow, it didn't matter, because he kissed me in the kitchen while the water boiled. Because he danced with me in the living room to a song neither of us knew. Because later, when we were curled up under a blanket watching some mindless TV show, he leaned in and said quietly, "You know I've had a thing for you since I was 16, right?" I turned to him, stunned. Wait, what? Leo laughed, cheeks flushing. I mean, it wasn't like a full-blown crush, but I used to get jealous when Dylan wouldn't invite you over. I stared at him. And you just sat on that for years? I figured you'd never look at me like that, he said with a shrug. I was just the annoying younger brother, the kid you tried to ignore. I laughed, shaking my head. You were so not just a kid. You had this way of, I don't know, being. Like the world never got to you. Still doesn't, he said, and reached over to take my hand. At least not when I'm here. That quiet confidence again. The steadiness I hadn't realized I'd been looking for. The rest of the week blurred. He started coming over more. Sometimes with a bag, sometimes just for dinner. We didn't define anything. We didn't have to. It was in the way he touched the small of my back when we passed each other. In the way he never let a night end without pressing his lips to mine, even if just for a second. Eventually, I stopped sleeping on my side of the bed. One night, as we lay tangled in sheets and limbs and quiet breaths, I asked him, "Does it feel weird? Us?" He turned his head, brushing his nose against mine. Only if weird means really, really good. I smiled, letting the words settle. Letting him settle. The world didn't shift suddenly. There were no fireworks, no declarations. Just the slow, steady build of something real. Something worth staying for. And when Dylan eventually found out, and yeah, it was awkward as hell, we dealt with it, together. Because Leo was right. Complicated didn't mean wrong. It just meant we had a story worth telling. And this was only the beginning.